Okay, just use some compressed air and cleaned out around the spark plug so that when I take the spark plug out, no debris will fall into the hole. Although I'm going to probably be pulling the head on this real soon anyways, but just for the heck of it. Taking the spark plug out so that when I crank it over, it's easier to crank. And I also use compressed air to blow the coolant out of the system there so that when I go to take this down into the basement later and work on it, I don't have to deal with so much coolant sloshing around coming out of it and making a mess. Here's the spark plug. It's not oil soaked. Looks like it was running lean. Still not what I would expect from a machine that needed a top end rebuild like this one supposedly does. Okay, I've taken the cover off the inspection port for the exhaust valves, which I hadn't been able to take off previously. I'd taken off the intake ones and couldn't see anything unusual in there. And looking down in there, and I see something down in there that kind of perplexes me. It almost looks like a curled up piece of wire or something. Not sure what the heck that is. You can see, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but it's down there, and I can actually, it's like a shredded spring is what it looks like. So that's interesting. If I turn it over, we seem to be actuating the way they should, but I'm going to take this cover off. Just want to make a note on these screws, all different size screws coming out of here. The two on the end, the two longer ones on the end that are the same size came out of this position and this position, which is marked number 5. There's number 5 right there. So this one and this one are these two long screws right here. This really long screw is number 2, came out of number 2, and these 3 short ones right here to the right came out of here, here, and here along the front near the exhaust ports. All the other screws I had removed previously when I had tried to take the cover off without removing the motor from the frame, which I found I wasn't able to do. Now I need to disconnect this little oil feeder line. The oil feeder line runs down here. It's kind of like a Y pipe. It goes over here and it goes all around, but you don't have to remove it to get the cover off. You actually have enough room to get the cover out, but you do want to make note that there are copper washers that actually during reassembly should be replaced, and there's one there on the underside of that, and then there's one that's on the top side still on this special bolt with the hole in it. So I'm going to just put that back in on the cover so that I don't lose it. And then I was real careful when I took the cover off, pulled it straight up and out. If I look at the underside of the cover, I see strands of ATV sealant or whatever type of sealant they used on here. Other than that, initial visual inspection, don't see anything broken. That looks okay. Alright, so now you can see what's going on here. The automatic compression release mechanism here looks like it's gone ballistic. That's what these shards of metal are that are in here. There's a little pin, steel pin laying in there, spring, and I can see the rest of the spring sticking out there. So this metal debris that I saw through the inspection port is clearly the remnants of the automatic compression release system. Now, my theory is that the reason why this thing runs so poorly is because the automatic compression release system being all trashed like this, maybe while it was running, it was still interfering with the valves in a way that would cause it to act like it's got low compression. So maybe this thing doesn't need rings or being bored out or anything like that. Maybe this is just something as simple as fixing this mechanism on the top here. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I don't think my luck is that good. There's a big part of the spring torn up spring and some other pieces of metal I pulled out that were wrapped inside this valve spring on the exhaust port. There's another big hunk of the spring just hanging out of the assembly over here. What's more alarming though is I dug out a little pocket of grease there, and way down in there, which is this, basically down in there is the plastic guide for the chain, and that right in that area over there, I dug this out, which when I smeared it, it's clearly all ground up, looks like ground up aluminum. So my fear is that whatever went catastrophic up here ended up getting down into the motor and getting ground up, and all of these little metal filings, who knows where they've gone or gotten into at this point, and it doesn't look good. So I think the next thing I'm going to want to do is pull this camshaft out and clean it up to see what kind of damage it has on the journals. Here's the camshaft chain tensioner. I'm going to remove that to completely slacken the camshaft chain so I can get the camshaft out. Alright, so I don't have a service manual and I don't know how to valve time this one. I want to take real note of how this is oriented. Hopefully I'll be able to figure it out this way. I basically brought the piston all the way to the top of its travel, and there's clearly a mark here on the camshaft, and that mark right now is kind of facing, it's not in a good position at all. That would make me think that that's correct, but it's a 4-stroke, so what I got to do is I got to bring this back down to the point where the piston comes up the second time, which one of those 2 times when it's at the top is going to be TDC, or top dead center. Well, this appears to be the second point where it's at top dead center, and the mark is up here now. It's still not really telling me much. There's no small cover or anything to indicate to me that that's the point, like an inspection cover you would open. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a look over here, see if there is a port you can open to look for top dead center. And sometimes they put one right on the face here. I don't see that, but I'll tell you what, that sure looks like one right there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove this plug and see what kind of markings I can see. I bet you the flywheel's right behind there. Alright, here's what I've figured out so far. Looking through this inspection port, it's kind of hard to see it with this camera, but looking into the inspection port, there's actually like a hole in the flywheel that when you pull it around, you can actually center that hole within this hole, and that hole looks like it might be where maybe a tool might engage to hold the flywheel. But there are 2 holes, I think, and I think they're probably 180 degrees opposite each other, and after one of the holes there are no marks, but after the second hole goes by, you immediately get a timing mark right there. And if you center that timing mark in that little slot on the side there, that actually corresponds to the piston being all the way at the very top. So when the first hole was there, the piston wasn't at the top, and then I rotated around to the second hole, appeared, and I felt that the piston, by putting a screwdriver in the spark plug hole, I felt the piston was actually on its way up and almost at the very top. And sure enough, just as it hit the top was when this mark came into view and was centered there. So where that mark is right there appears to be top dead center. Now, as far as on the camshaft, the only mark I can see on the camshaft is this mark right here. And this mark right here is, well, really not pointing to anything, unfortunately. So not quite sure how you go about making sure that that's in that exact position when you've got that other thing set correctly. Now the other thing I noticed is that there's also a second timing mark right after you pass that first one. So I'm going to bring it to that mark now. Okay, I'm now set to that second timing mark centered in the slot on that port, and this mark moved a little bit, but it's still not lined up with anything in particular. I was actually hoping that it would line up flush with this surface right here. Should make it real easy to figure out where the alignment point was, but that's not the case. Lo and behold, I kept rotating it, and now I've come to yet a third mark, and this one has a big T, a third mark that has a big T stamped right on the flywheel next to it. So I think that might be the true mark. So let's see, maybe that's for checking ignition timing. I'm not sure, but again, this mark has now moved forward down to this point, but still not really lined up with anything definitive. Okay, so now that I get the slack out of this chain, before I take the chain off the camshaft so I can take the camshaft out, I'm going to tie a little bit of wire around the chain and then secure it to something so that the chain doesn't fall down inside the crankcase. Okay, so now I've got my chain tied up so it won't fall down, and I can take the camshaft right out. I'm going to clean it off and inspect it. Okay, I cleaned this up some, and now got this little tangled piece of spring that was stuck in there out. Kind of looked at this, tried to figure out how this mechanism operated, and not sure exactly how this went together, but I mean, it's definitely got something catastrophic happened here. This looks like there was a tiny hole on the end here that this little piece broke off. I'm thinking maybe this was one end of the spring might have hooked on there. I'm not sure where the other end of the spring would have went. Almost looks like there should have been something in that hole. I'm thinking that's that tiny pin that I can see still down inside here. I haven't fished it out yet. Thinking that tiny pin was in that hole. Thinking there might have been a coil spring underneath that pin. Kept the pin pushing up. This is supposed to be on here. Once this snapped off, that allowed this to fly free enough for that coil spring to push that little pin out. So that's what I think is going on over here. So I wonder how much this assembly costs. If it's part of the camshaft and I have to buy the complete camshaft to get it, then that's going to be that might be a deal breaker right there. I might not bother fixing this thing. Here's that tiny little metal pin that I was talking about. And that was actually sitting down in here. And by some miracle it stayed there instead of going down inside there and where the crankshaft is. Unfortunately, the journals that the camshaft write in, this one in particular, this one doesn't look too bad. This one in particular looks like maybe some of that metal had gotten in there and damaged it. I can feel grooves with my fingernail. Not a good sign. And it's just soft aluminum, so it wouldn't take much to get in there, and judging from all the ground metal pieces I found inside here, I think that kind of tells me where a lot of that metal was coming from. So I'm going to pull the head. Well, got the cylinder head off, and valves don't look bad at all. They don't look like they're burnt. I don't see any signs of them being bent. Of course, without taking them actually out and looking at the valve seats, it's kind of hard to tell, but nothing catastrophic with the valves. Top of the piston looks pretty good. A little tiny piece of metal right here that fell out of something. Not sure what. I think that fell into the cylinder after. These are my scratch marks from when I was putting the screwdriver in there just to try and figure out where top dead center was. And you can see I am at TDC. So let's bring the cylinder down, or piston down. Of course, the tricky thing about that is when you've got this chain, you gotta make sure you hold the chain up as you're rotating it, otherwise the chain can get all bound up down in there. Then you're gonna have a real problem. So I'm gonna put the video down to do this. Alright, I'll tell you what, that cylinder looks pretty good. Feels smooth as glass. Some light scoring on the walls, but well, I'll tell you, that looks pretty darn good. If I do decide to rebuild this thing, I think I'll just end up probably putting a new set of rings in it and honing the cylinder walls, because it's glazed, that's for sure. But other than that, now I know why it didn't seem to be burning any oil, even though it needed supposedly a top end job. This thing, other than, you know, if it wasn't for the catastrophic event that happened with the decompression release, this thing probably would still be running strong. I've now removed the cylinder assembly. That was simply two other small screws here, and then removing this screw, which is holds this clip on right here for the supply tube, the oil supply tube. And I got the cylinder assembly off. Now I can see the scoring on the piston's pretty bad over here. Matter of fact, I can actually feel this with my fingernail right here. There's a groove right here that's pretty bad, so that's not too good. I'm going to get my little pick tool, and I'm going to pick out this little clip here so I can remove the wrist pin and take the piston off.